When you think of Iran and Israel, you probably think sworn enemies, right? It's a rivalry that has pretty much defined the Middle East for decades. But what if I told you that whole story has this wild, almost forgotten first chapter? And to really get what's happening today, we have to go back and uncover it. I mean, you saw the headlines just this year, right? In 2024, things got really intense. We're talking about the first ever direct, major military exchange between them. It put the entire region, really the whole world, on edge. And that's the reality we're living with now. These two powerful countries locked in a super dangerous standoff. But, and this is the part that blows most people's minds, to really get today's headlines, you have to rewind to a totally different time. Seriously. Before all the threats, before the shadow wars, these two countries were partners. Secret partners, yeah, but partners nonetheless. They were sharing intelligence, trading crucial resources, even working on military projects together. They were, believe it or not, allies. So, what on earth changed? How do you go from being secret partners to mortal enemies on the brink of war? That's the big question, right? And to answer it, we've got to go back. All right, so let's start the clock back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. This is the era of Iran's last monarch, the Shah. The Middle East back then, a completely different chessboard. And that led to some pretty unexpected friendships. Now, this partnership wasn't about shared culture or ideology, not at all. It was pure, hard-nosed pragmatism. Think about it. Israel is newly formed in 1948, surrounded by hostile Arab neighbors. In Iran, it's a non-Arab Persian nation. Both of them felt really isolated and, frankly, threatened by this huge wave of pan-Arab nationalism that was sweeping the region, led by figures like Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. So it was a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They were basically united by a common fear. And don't think this was just some minor handshake deal. No, this was a deep partnership, all happening in the shadows. We're talking about Iran supplying the oil that was absolutely critical for Israel's survival. In return, Israel was giving Iran top-notch agricultural know-how and tech support. Their intelligence agencies were working closely. They even secretly collaborated on missile projects together. This was a real, functional, super important alliance. And then, 1979 happened. This is the turning point, the one single event that just completely shattered everything. It's the great rupture in our story. The Iranian Revolution wasn't just a change of leadership. It was a complete 180-degree flip of the entire country's worldview. The new Islamic Republic, under Ayatollah Khomeini, basically took the Shah's pro-Western foreign policy and threw it right in the trash. And guess what was at the very top of that list to be rejected? Yep, its partnership with Israel. And the change was absolute. The language just flipped overnight. A former secret partner was now publicly branded an illegitimate state, an enemy of Islam. It was a total ideological shift. Diplomatic ties? Gone. In a really symbolic move, they even handed the keys to the Israeli embassy in Tehran over to the Palestine Liberation Organization. After that, there was just no going back. So this war of words very quickly turned into something much more dangerous. But a direct, head-to-head war wasn't really an option for either side. So instead, the conflict moved into the shadows. This is where the shadow war begins, fought through other groups, other countries, through proxies. Iran's playbook became pretty clear. Build a network of allies and proxies across the region to put pressure on Israel without having to fire a shot from Iranian soil. So, by funding and arming groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, right on Israel's northern border, or Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the Palestinian territories, Iran could fight its battle indirectly. Now, if you're Israel, what does this look like? It looks like a terrifying strategy of encirclement. Suddenly, you've got Iranian-backed forces right on your doorstep. And this is where you get the two completely different stories that fuel the conflict to this day. From Israel's point of view, it's an existential threat. They see a network of terror groups funded by Iran aiming for their total destruction. But from Iran's perspective, they say they're supporting legitimate resistance movements against Western influence and Israeli occupation. And this fundamental clash of narratives, that's the real engine of the shadow war. Okay, so for decades, this shadow war had its own kind of weird unwritten rules. You can do this, but you can't do that. But in 2024, all those rules got thrown out the window. the conflict exploded out of the shadows and right into the open for everyone to see. And the scale of it was just unprecedented. We're talking over 300 drones and missiles launched directly from Iran's own territory toward Israel. That had never happened before. It was a massive, unmistakable message. The old rules are dead. But then there's the other side of the story, which is just as important, the outcome. An incredible 99% of those drones and missiles were shot down by Israel and its allies before they could hit their targets. 99%. That showed the world just how powerful their defensive shield is, and, well, it changed the whole strategic game all over again. So you might be asking, what was the point of all that then? Well, it seems the goal wasn't actually all-out destruction. It was about sending a message. It was about deterrence. Iran proved it had the capability and the will to strike Israel directly, and Israel proved it had the capability to defend itself almost perfectly. Both sides were basically drawing new, very clear red lines in a very, very dangerous game. And that brings us right back to today. The entire region is kind of holding its breath, you know? The future here rests on this incredibly fragile, incredibly unpredictable balance of power. And look, this whole rivalry isn't happening in a vacuum. It's way more complicated than just two countries. You've got to factor in Iran's nuclear program, which is a huge deal. You've got the proxy conflicts still simmering all over the region. Then you add in the big global players, the US, Russia, China, all with their own interests. And, of course, there's always the global oil market, which gets nervous anytime things heat up here. Here's the real paradox, though. This is what makes this whole thing so tricky to solve. Both sides, Iran and Israel, genuinely believe they are the ones acting defensively. Each one sees the other as the aggressor. And when both sides are convinced they're just defending themselves, well, it makes it almost impossible to find a way to de-escalate. So that's the question we're all left with, isn't it? Deterrence or disaster? Can this delicate, dangerous balance actually hold? Or is one side going to make one wrong move, one miscalculation that sparks a massive, devastating war across the whole region? If this untold history teaches us anything, it's that alliances can shift and enemies can change. Nothing is set in stone. The next chapter is still waiting to be written.